What was your reaction to seeing the video of the hostage? What are things you notice that the average person may not?
Well, what I notice is that in many instances like this, the hostage is told what to say, and they really can't speak freely. There's the conflict there, is that they are instructed exactly what to say, how to say it. And what I could see is the distress in the body language of this young woman. And I can only imagine what each and every one of the hostages and their families are feeling during this tense time. So it's unimaginable. Imagine, being there and being told what to do. And if you don't follow the instructions of your captors, you know exactly what's going to happen.
Absolutely. And Paul, why do you think Hamas opted to release this video now, so many days after the original kidnapping, after these hostages were taken?
It's very difficult to really pinpoint the reason why, but everybody is asking, is there proof of life? So we need proof of life in order to move forward, especially negotiating sides need to understand, or the ones who want the hostages released would like proof of life. And this may be one of those instances where releasing one video might satisfy the thoughts or the questions that a lot of people have, especially the Israelis.
What will it take? What is going to be key to getting these hostages back and getting them back safely?
Oh, Nichole, that's a loaded question, but I'm going to start with this. In any negotiation, it requires that the two sides negotiate, that they speak to each other, and that they do so with intention to resolve it. There's going to have to be some give and there's going to have to be some take on whichever side, but it comes down to really putting aside the anger, if that's, and that's probably not possible here, but it's going to require people who are prepared to negotiate and to work together at coming to a resolution that works. And that comes down to communication, comes down to willingness, it comes down to purpose. And really, we need people who are right-minded, in their right mind, to sit down and chat, talk, negotiate. It really comes down to that ability to listen and to cooperate. Cooperation is a big thing.
And Paul, how do you think this all ends? Is it a good sign that we are seeing this video? We are seeing one of the hostages alive?
Oh, I think it's a great sign when we see anyone alive. I think that that is a sign. How this is going to end, Nichole, I don't know, because we're dealing with radicalism, and we're dealing with something that most Westerners don't understand. We don't understand how the terrorists think. Like we can't put our heads around how they regard human life, especially their enemies' human life. We just, as Westerners, we think to ourselves, well, that's unimaginable. But to the people, to the terrorists, they think very differently than we do. What it's going to take here is just comes down to what are we prepared to live with, and what are we prepared to give and take? And it's both sides that need to get that communication and that negotiation going. We as Westerners, we sit here, we can't imagine the unspeakable terrors that are happening. But there, it's quite different.
It is quite different. Paul, before we let you go, we don't have much time left, but we mentioned this at the top. I want to make sure, tell us quickly about your story. I know you were a hostage negotiator, but your own life was saved at one point.
Yes, I was in the Middle East during the Iraq War, 2005, as a peacekeeper, and we were warned that there was going to be an attack, and that I was teaching at a police academy. in Jordan. And we were told that the academy was going to come under attack and that internationals were going to be they're going to be killed, as well as some cadets, Iraqi cadets who supported just freedom. And one day, my partner and I were walking through the desert, and we were surrounded by 40 armed terrorists whose intent were to kill us. They reached in, they started to beat us to death. They didn't have any firearms, but they started to beat us. And one man in that whole crowd of 40 could be heard shouting my name, Mr. Paul, Mr. Paul, Mr. Paul. And he shouted something else in Arabic, and he put a stop to the attack. And when I was able to focus and just get back into realizing what was going on, because I had been assaulted, I realized that it was one of my students, one of my former students that I had had communication with, and that I had listened to, and I had treated him not as an enemy, but as an individual. And he repaid that moment of treating him with the dignity and respect by saving my life. And I think that he probably did that at the cost of his own. And my whole message has been, if we only could treat each other with dignity and respect, could you imagine the outcomes of things like this? And this goes and applies to this war as much as it does to any other.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.